Welcome to Iowa Pulse, where we keep you on the record and in the know. Today we're settling in for a forensic deep dive into a legal battle, that is. Well, it's as complex as it is concerning. We're looking at a civil lawsuit filed in Minnesota District Court, file number 65, CV 2414.
And while the paperwork, is officially filed up in Minnesota, the heartbeat of this story, and the heartbreak, frankly, it's right here in Iowa.
Exactly. Our mission today is to analyze the human and legal impact of a corporate war. This isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This stretches from a beef processing plant in Buffalo Lake, Minnesota, all the way back to the bank accounts and the livelihoods of investors in small-town Iowa. We're talking about families in Sibley, Sanborn, Paulina, and Rock Valley.
Right, so the plaintiffs here are a group of minority shareholders. And for those who might not follow corporate litigation every day, minority shareholder just means they own less than 50% of the company.
These are the people who put their money in.
They put their money and their trust into this venture only to allegedly watch it get dismantled from the inside. They're suing what the complaint calls the majority group, which includes corporate officers like Krista Rocher, an attorney, Bruce Phillips, and members of the Raveling and Kirchhoff families.
And I have to say, having read through this complaint, this is not your standard, boring boardroom dispute. The allegations here, they read like a corporate thriller. I mean, we're talking about a hostile takeover, secret boardroom coups, shell companies popping up overnight.
Vanishing millions.
Millions of dollars vanishing into thin air. And a scheme described, and this is a quote, as robbing Peter to pay Paul.
It paints a picture of what can really only be described as corporate cannibalism. The central question the source material poses is, was this business run to process beef, or was it run to process the minority shareholders out of their investments?
That is a heavy, heavy accusation.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this from the very beginning. We need to understand the dream before we can understand the nightmare. This all starts back in June 2020. Two entities are formed, MN Property Holdings and US 212 Beef. What was the plan?
The structure itself was pretty standard for the industry. You split the business in two, mainly to protect your assets. So you have one company, MN Property Holdings, that's the landlord. They hold the building itself.
Okay.
Then you have US 212 Beef, and they're the operator. They run the plant, hire the people, process the cattle. The goal was to own and rent this beef processing facility in Buffalo Lake.
And this is where that Iowa connection really comes in strong. You look at the list of initial investors, the Van Ness family, the Rordas, the Kodems, the Schutas. These are people from Sibley, Sanborn, Rock Valley. They bought into this vision. But help me understand the financial setup, because it wasn't just straightforward stock, was it?
No, and this is so crucial to understanding how things went wrong later. The financials at the start they were significant. There was a $25 million lease-to-own agreement for the facility. And to get the gears turning, the shareholders raised about $4.7 million in initial capital. But the way they raised that money is a detail we just can't gloss over. It was largely through promissory notes.
Okay, let's pause there. For the listener who isn't a forensic accountant, what's the difference? Buying stock versus holding a promissory note. Why does that matter here?
It's a great question. When you buy stock, you own a piece of the equity, a piece of the company. When you hold a promissory note, you've essentially just loaned the company money.
With the promise of being paid back.
Right. And in a closely held corporation like this, meaning, there are only a few shareholders, the stock isn't on the New York Stock Exchange. This setup creates a very specific vulnerability.
Because if I own stock in, say, Apple, and I don't like what the CEO is doing, I can just sell my shares on my phone.
Exactly. But here, there's no market. You are locked in. You can't just hit sell. And if the people running the show, the majority group, decide to go rogue, or if they decide to stop paying back those loans, the minority shareholders are trapped. They are strapped into the roller coaster, like it or not.
And the big drop seems to happen in July of 2021. This looks like the turning point where everything just goes off the rails. What happened?
It's a classic power struggle. July 14th, 2021, you've got the annual meeting. And there's an offer on the table from an outside investment group to buy the company for $22.6 million.
Okay, so for the Iowa investors, this looks great. This is a win, a good exit, a chance to take a profit and walk away.
You'd think so. But the leadership, specifically Krista Rocher, didn't want to sell. According to the sources, he wanted to stay in control. But here's the kicker. They hold a vote, and the shareholders actually vote against re-electing DeRocher to the board.
Oh, wow.
They elect a new 5-person board that includes several of those Iowa investors.
So the system worked. The shareholders spoke, they wanted new leadership, and they voted the old guy out. Democracy in action.
Technically, yes. That is how it's supposed to work. But according to the complaint, the majority group did not accept the loss. This is where we see the alleged coup. The complaint details a secret meeting on September 20th, 2021, between DeRocher, attorney Bruce Phillips, and other majority shareholders.
A secret meeting sounds dramatic, but what did they actually do? I mean, you can't just ignore a board election, can you?
Well, the lawsuit alleges that they essentially did just that. They executed what they called a vote to remove directors. But here's the wild part. They did it without a proper meeting, without notifying the minority group at all. They basically held a secret election where only they were invited, and they used their combined voting power to strip the Iowa directors of their titles.
Without them even being in the room to object.
Exactly.
That just sounds like a complete breakdown of governance.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the complaint here, and there's a piece of evidence about attorney Bruce Phillips that is just... it's breathtaking.
The email.
Yeah, the email. Listen to this tone. Phillips, the company's own attorney, writes, quote, "I'm not sure just how to respond. Brennan is the sole remaining board member. The others have been voted off the board by the majority of the shareholders." He's writing this as if he's confused, feigning ignorance even though the complaint alleges he was the one orchestrating the whole thing.
It's gaslighting on an administrative level, and by removing those Iowa directors, the majority group seized total control. And once they had the wheel, the finances just drove right off a cliff.
Okay, let's follow the money, or what's left of it. This is where it gets really forensic. The complaint states that in September 2021, the company was healthy. They had $9 million in cash. $9 million.
That is a very healthy operating cushion for a plant that size. That's payroll, that's inventory, that's safety.
But shortly after this quote-unquote hostile board takes over, that account drains to under $500,000. Where did $8.5 million go in such a short time?
That is the $8.5 million question. The plaintiffs claim that when they asked for bank statements, they were just ignored. But the effect was immediate. The company defaulted on a $7 million line of credit and started missing lease payments.
Wait, hold on. How do you default on a loan when you had $9 million in the bank a few weeks before?
Precisely. This brings us to a legal concept called waste of corporate assets. But in this context, it looks like something more strategic. If you're trying to squeeze out minority partners, a healthy company is actually a problem for you.
So you wreck it on purpose.
By creating artificial financial distress, you put the minority shareholders in a panic. You devalue the company so those outside buyers walk away. It's like setting your own house on fire so you can buy the charred remains for pennies because you know you've got the insurance money stashed away somewhere.
And they use that distress as a weapon. This brings us to this dilution scheme, the part described as robbing Peter to pay Paul. I need you to break this down simply because dilution sounds like chemistry. But here, it sounds like theft.
It's a sophisticated squeeze-out. It starts with what's called a capital call. The majority group tells all the members, hey, we're broke because we drained the account, so everyone needs to chip in millions of dollars to keep the lights on.
Okay, so if I'm an Iowa investor, I'm being told I have to write a check for, say, $100,000 immediately, or what? What happens?
If you can't pay up, your slice of the pie gets smaller. Your ownership percentage literally drops. That's dilution. And their goal, it seems, was to get the majority group's ownership over 80%. That's the magic number in their operating agreement that lets them force a sale of the company without the minority's consent.
But wait a minute. If the company's so broke, how did the majority group afford to pay their share of the capital call? If DeRocher and his team are putting money in, doesn't that prove they're committed?
Ah, that is where the check-kiting style scheme comes in. This is the smoking gun in the financial records. According to the lawsuit, the company used its working capital to pay off long-term loans that were held only by the hostile board members, DeRocher, Raveling, and the others.
Let me make sure I have this straight. The company pays the majority group members for loans that weren't even due yet. So cash leaves the company and goes into the pockets of the board member.
Correct.
And then those same board members take that very same cash, turn around, and put it right back into the company as their capital call contribution.
Exactly. They use the company's own money to increase their ownership share. It's round-tripping. They didn't put in a dime of new money. Meanwhile, the minority members from Iowa who didn't get these loan payouts, they had to come up with fresh cash from their personal savings or lose their stake.
That is diabolical. You're effectively using the victim's own wallet to buy their house.
It's highly effective if you can get away with it. The complaint says the majority group's ownership went from about 52% to over 80% using this method. They effectively used the Iowa investors' own initial investment to dilute them.
And once they hit that 80% threshold, the asset stripping really began. In October 2022, there was a fire sale. But again, not a normal sale where you put an ad in the paper.
No, not at all. The board sold all the production equipment, the grinders, the conveyor belts, everything you need to process beef to a new entity. It was called 212 Holdings.
And let me guess who owned 212 Holdings.
The majority group, of course. They sold the equipment to themselves for book value, about $860,000. That's an accounting value, likely far below what you'd get on the open market. Then, immediately, they leased that same equipment back to the company for over $18,000 a month.
So they stripped the assets out and then charged the company rent to use the machines it used to own yesterday.
It transfers wealth from the shared company right into the private pockets of the majority group. It guarantees them a monthly income stream while the original company sinks deeper and deeper into debt. And it didn't stop there. The complaint lists this dizzying web of shell companies created by attorney Phillips. MN 212 Properties, 212 Beef Production, 212 Management Services, and 10,000 Lakes Beef.
10,000 Lakes Beef. I saw that name in the emails. They actually told customers to send payments to US 212 Beef or 10,000 Lakes Beef, basically treating them as the same thing. Why create so many names? Is it just to be confusing?
Confusion is part of the tactic, yes, but the allegation is that they were using the old name as an alias to hijack the USDA establishment number. See, you can't just process beef without that USDA number. It can take months, sometimes longer, to get approved. By blurring the lines, they could keep operating under the new shell companies and collecting revenue in 10,000 Lakes Beef while leaving all the debts and liabilities back in the old US 212 Beef Company.
The one owned by the Iowa investors. It's a shell game in the truest sense of the word. But we have to remember, amidst all these LLCs and bank transfers, there are real people getting hurt. I want to talk about Brian Lilly.
Brian Lilly's story is a prime example of the human cost here. He wasn't just some passive investor writing checks from a distance. He was a former employee who put his career on the line.
The notes say he invested $1.7 million. That was his own money and his company's money. And he was promised he could manage beef exports to China. A huge opportunity.
The complaint details just a profound betrayal. Lilly claims the company took his money, but instead of treating it as the investment they agreed on, they just unilaterally classified it as a loan he never agreed to. Then, they allegedly deleted his export orders from the system and basically stole his customers.
It sounds like they just wanted his cash to plug the holes they'd created, but they didn't actually want him involved. And when he pushed back?
Retaliation. Pure and simple. When Lilly pointed out that what they were doing was likely illegal, he was fired. Locked out of the computer system. They even refused to pay his accrued time off, which is a classic wage theft claim.
And it got personal. The complaint brings up a smear campaign. When Lilly tried to organize a buyout to save the company, he was trying to rescue everyone. Attorney Phillips allegedly circulated emails suggesting Lilly was a criminal just to kill the deal.
It just shows the length to which the defendants allegedly went to maintain control. It wasn't enough to fire him. They had to try and destroy his reputation. They would rather ruin a partner than lose their grip on the asset.
And speaking of losing their grip, by 2023, the walls were closing in. The business was failing. But there was another lifeline, wasn't there? Another offer on the table.
A big one. An offer to buy the whole mess for up to $30 million. That could have made everyone whole. It covers the debts, pays back the Iowa investors.
And probably leaves some profit. It was the escape hatch.
It was.
So why didn't they take it? Why would you turn that down?
Because the majority group, allegedly, stalled. They moved the goalposts. They demanded an extra $5 million at the last minute. But the most telling demand, and this really signals their mindset, was that they insisted on a release of all claims.
They wanted immunity.
Exactly. They knew they had legal exposure for everything we've just discussed. The secret meetings, the asset stripping, all of it. They wouldn't sell unless the buyers agreed that no one could sue them. The buyers refused, and the deal fell apart.
And while they were haggling, the business was collapsing. The notes here reveal what I think is the smoking gun of mismanagement. The USDA got involved.
Yeah, in July 2023, the USDA issued a notice of violation. They declared US 212 Beef insolvent, and the numbers were stark. Assets of $7.2 million against liabilities of $18.3 million. The company was completely underwater.
And there is a brief but ugly mention of consumer fraud in there too. Allegations that they were mispacking lower quality beef and labeling it as Angus.
Which just adds another layer. Mislabeling food products is a federal issue. It destroys consumer trust. It invites massive fines. It suggests a culture where cutting corners wasn't just a financial strategy, it was an operational one.
So where does this leave the plaintiffs, the folks from Iowa? What are they asking the court to do?
They're asking for what is basically the nuclear option in corporate law. First, they want the directors removed immediately. They want Brian Lilly appointed as CEO to try and salvage what's left.
They also want to pierce the courtship veil. That's a term lawyers love, but what does it mean for the families in Sibley?
Piercing the veil means asking the court to just ignore the legal separation between the company and the individuals. Usually, if a company goes broke, the owners aren't personally liable. But if you can prove the owners used the company as a piggy bank for fraud-like with those shell companies, the court can say, no, you don't get protection. They want the court to look through all that paperwork and say, this is all one big scheme, and order the reimbursement of everything.
The $9 million in cash, the equipment.
All of it. And the clock is ticking because the bank is not waiting around.
Yeah.
Pioneer Bank has sent letters calling in personal guarantees. Because the company has stopped operating, the bank is now coming after the individuals who signed for the debt. This brings the crisis right to the doorstep of those investors in Sibley and Sanborn. They could be on the hook for millions if the court doesn't step in.
What a mess. So let's bring this all back to the human impact we promised to analyze. We have investors from our communities who put their faith and their savings into a regional business, only to see it drained by what the complaint calls gross mismanagement and greed.
It highlights a critical breach of what's called fiduciary duty. In a business, the directors are supposed to look out for the welfare of the company and all its shareholders. That's the sacred trust of being on a board. But the narrative here is that the controllers prioritize their own power and their own pockets over the survival of the business itself. And when you do that, everyone loses. The investors, the employees like Brian Lilly, and the local economy that relies on that plant.
It really makes you wonder, if these allegations are true, and again, we have to emphasize this is all from the plaintiff's complaint, it hasn't been proven in court yet, was the goal ever really to run a successful beef plant? Or was the business just a vessel, just a tool to extract cash from minority partners who trusted the wrong people?
That is the provocative question, isn't it? Sometimes in modern finance, the product isn't the beef, the product is the investors.
A sobering thought to end on. We will be watching the Minnesota District Court for updates on File 65 CV 2414. Thank you for tuning in to this deep dive on Iowa Pulse. New briefings are available regularly to keep you informed.